Welcome to Film Witch, a podcast with me, Sandy Settle, practicing pagan witch and tarot reader for over a decade, and a big fan of films. Here I talk about movies, their intersections with witchcraft and femininity, and whatever else I have on my mind, which is usually a lot. Blessed be, come in and sit for a spell. And please rate and review me on Apple, follow me on YouTube and Spotify, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. It helps way more than you might realize, and it means everything to me. Please consider joining my Patreon, which is the best thing you can do to help this podcast continue. You can also find me on Instagram and on Letterboxd at FilmWitchPod. You can send kind words, suggestions, and business inquiries to filmwitchpod@gmail.com. From 1982, a group of Americans are stationed at a remote research outpost in the Arctic. A strange encounter with a group of Norwegians who tried to kill a dog running through camp throws off the dull equilibrium. When said dog morphs into a hellish monster, things get notably worse. Carpenter's paranoid masterpiece prods us to explore not only the unseeable face of cosmic horror, but the deep hostility we are given to feel towards each other when the seed of paranoia is planted in the human psyche. Hello again, everybody. I didn't necessarily expect to have my husband guest so soon again with me, but I wanted to do the thing. Originally, I had planned to do this episode in January, so we were kind of going for wintry horror, but we got pushed back to March. Nevertheless, this is one of maybe your favorite film. One of your favorite films.
Yeah, not my favorite.
So I felt I would be remiss to have anybody else, honestly, on for this episode with me. It just did not feel right, babe. So welcome back.
It's really cold in this room, so.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
We live up in the mountains, and it has been an extremely frigid, long winter this year. Definitely way worse than last year. Really snowy and really, really cold and really, really windy. So it still kind of feels like winter.
Yeah.
Up here. We've had a few warm days, but yeah, for us, it's still winter, so we can still do this episode. I've seen this movie multiple times. I think most cinephiles have at this point. Definitely considered one of the great horror films. I think objectively, that can definitely be put out there as a statement. Subjectively, however you feel about this film is one thing, but definitely one of the best made horror films ever. I wanted to ask you though, babe, kind of what you feel like draws you back to this film again and again and makes you kind of think of it as like one of the best films you've ever seen.
I think honestly, it's just like most of Carpenter's films from that era have the same replay value for me. There's something really unique about his perspective, his quality of filmmaking that just really appeals to me. Like just the rawness of it, and like that Prince of Darkness is the same way, and like they're just so creepy but like really cool in like a way that you totally couldn't make today because it's so like analog and like VHS style. I mean, it wasn't VHS, but whatever.
Yeah. Like the beginning where he's like playing chess on the little computer.
Yeah. It's just like such a time capsule, but like it doesn't look cheesy or anything. It still looks like so amazing good. And disgusting in parts, and it just like really captures a vibe that is not possible to capture anymore, I think.
Yeah.
In the digital age.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up, like the kind of like practical stuff in this movie, and we'll talk about it some more, obviously, because it's a big reason why this movie holds up as well as it does, I think. But it's funny thinking about it, and I thought about this a lot since we watched the movie, is how great this movie still looks. Like it looks so gross and like just like really unnerving. It's like really nightmare fuel, I think the tangibility of like that, it looks like something you could reach out and touch, right? And that is scarier, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of movies, like a lot of horror, like old horror from this period and stuff, like you did practical effects because that's all you had, right? You had to do practical effects. And like you certainly watch some movies from this time period that are just like goofy looking, and like, but they're like fun, but like they don't look like scary, I think the thing that sticks out in your mind so much about this one is not only is it physical and it's like tangible, but it's like whatever they did with it is just like nasty.
It's
like,
so gross.
and you're just like, man, that's gross. Like, and it like makes you kind of like sick to your stomach, you know, like, and it's like, that's scary, you know, like
those little like tendrils that always come out with that sound, and the sound they use for it is like so perfect and so gross and so upsetting and like so unique too. I don't really see that effect much.
Yeah, the marriage of like the Morricone music and like the sound effects and the physical effects and the performances, right? I think like that's the difference between like a good film and a great film. It's like somehow everything like came together and everything works. Yeah, which, you know, we'll talk about it a little bit more too, but like makes it even crazier that this film was like critically panned and like didn't do well at the box office and like all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that makes you wonder about like the psyche of the time, you know. I know a lot of people have talked about that, but
that was Reagan years, right? That was 80s it came
out.
Yeah,
it came out the same year as E.T. So everyone was like the appetite for it just wasn't there. Like people wanted to like be like cheerful, you know, and like they would be like, everything's on the up, and like, and then they had like the happy, like sweet alien movie the same year. And everyone's like, we love this movie. And then John Carpenter's like, get a load of this, you know, like everyone's like, gross, you know, like, but you know, later here in 2025, we're like, this is legit. This is the real deal.
I mean, E.T. still holds up too. So like,
I know, I know, right? Like you can't, Agree. You can't be mad at it's not E.T.'s fault, you know? Like some people are like, it's because E.T. came out, and I'm like, but that movie's cute.
No, it's because John Carpenter's movies always got panned, and critics are stupid. That's why.
Well, he is very pessimistic. Like,
yes, he is.
Because so for the bonus episode this time around, I'm doing In the Mouth of Madness. So I revisited that over the past couple of days. And like I was reminded again, you know, like I was reminded, you know, about a year ago when we watched Escape from New York and like watching In the Mouth of Madness, and like this is an inherently pessimistic artist, you know, like his pessimism is on like full display in his work, right?
Well, I think like that's what makes it so appealing of coming from that era of the Reagan years is like you want to watch something pessimistic because shit sucked.
Because like shit was bad, but everybody was like drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah. He was like, he's like, this is all bullshit.
Yeah, like if you think about like music in the 80s, pop wise, was just like so cheerful and stuff. The stuff I love from the 80s is like all the hardcore and punk records.
Yeah, like all the people who were like who did not have the wool pulled over their eyes by like the general kind of like mainstream consensus that everything was fine. Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know. I'm always like, especially these days, maybe because we're like parents and we're in our 30s now, like it's just like so obvious to me that he's coming kind of from this like, not like depressed standpoint, but like he's very cynical, you know, like he's coming from, and like he's like that in his interviews sometimes too. I feel like maybe as he's gotten older, he's like, he's like loosened up kind of, you know, where he's like, I don't
Spielberg
care.
Are really good polls to pick.
Yeah, right. I think that
I never thought about that.
It's funny that like E.T. and this came out the same year, because it's like, man, they could not be more different, but they're both like really skilled. You know, it's like you can like both like
I want to see the Carpenter dinosaur movie that came out the same year as Jurassic Park.
Oh hell yeah, man!
I want that to happen. Go back in time.
I feel like now that you mentioned, like, bring that up, I feel like E.T. and Thing are like representative of the two parts of my personality. Like I have this like hippie like flower child side, and then this really dark
horror fan
like really that dig like just absolutely digs like the occult and like stuff that's about death.
Thing was the third movie of the trilogy, right? Or the first. It was I know it was Prince of Darkness, Mouth of Madness.
I believe it was the first.
But The Thing was the other movie in that trilogy. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's Prince of Darkness, The Thing, and In the Mouth of Madness. But The Thing was the first of the three. He calls them his Apocalypse trilogy. They happen to be my three favorite Carpenter movies. Funny thing there, yeah. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the origin of this film, just real quick. It's based on a novella called Who Goes There by a man named John W. Campbell. It was later reprinted under the title The Thing from Another World, which is the Howard Hawks movie that apparently does not follow. We were going to watch that movie, but we decided not to. And part of the reason I felt like I didn't really ultimately care to watch it, for this episode was that I read that it is not very similar at all, and that it doesn't follow the novella either. It's kind of a monster. It's like a monster movie, like a Universal monster movie, right? Like it's not like Eldritch, it's more like straightforward kind of monstery movie. So it's like, I've heard it's fine, but as far as this movie kind of coming from that movie, I would say it comes more from the novella than it comes from that previous movie. It just shares like similar title stuff. And that movie says that it's based on that story, but it's like they weren't very faithful to it. It was originally published in Astounding Science Fiction magazine in 1938. I love those like old like science fiction magazines and like the old horror magazines that Lovecraft was like publishing astounding stories and stuff like that. Those are just amazing. So it was in one of those. I have a little thing here that says its story follows a group of people trapped in a scientific outpost in Antarctica, infested by shape-shifting monsters able to absorb and perfectly imitate any living being, including humans. So that's, pretty much exactly what Carpenter took and ran with. We were talking about the film when it came out. It came out in the summertime, which a lot of people say contributed to it kind of bombing, like it should have come out in like January, or it should have come out in like December, and E.T. came out that summer too, and it was like nobody had an appetite for it. So there was a recession going on at the time. I wrote, there seemed to be this belief at the time that anything gross was also garbage. This is kind of reflected in some of the original critics' reviews of the film at the time that I was reading, that like because it was gross, it was trash, right? Like, and this was like a prevailing kind of like opinion of the time, right? And it's come all the way to the present as far as how the public reacts to horror film and like its place in society and its place in culture, right? There's been this new wave over the past couple decades of like elevated horror, quote unquote, which is really just like, I don't know, horror that's like more artistically made in a way that like a mainstream person could recognize, right?
Yeah.
So like, high quality cinematography or, that kind of thing. But like all of us who are horror fans, the honest truth we know is that like horror is as essential to culture and to art as any other art form. And it's taken a while for people to catch up with that. The idea of that, because it's a lot more confrontational, right, than a lot of other art forms. I think that we've seen that humans can be very fear-based animals, and that fear response, I think, kind of overrode like any kind of appreciation of it. And maybe it's cyclical too, as far as like where we are at that moment in history, as far as how many people can appreciate something like this.
I think also it's like in the 80s when this movie came out and was totally panned. It was panned by probably, I'm assuming, older critics who grew up with really schlocky horror that was just made like dime a dozen horror films,
Yeah, probably a lot of the critics had seen the original, right, when it first came out, like maybe when they were teenagers. Yeah. And they were expecting something more like that.
But I think I just wonder like if that's why horror got such a bad rap for so long, because it was like old critics who like grew up in that mindset, and now you have people who grew up with this generation of horror movies and they're like, oh, horror is a totally valid art form, like.
Yeah, though I'm sure you get like plenty of people who were teens when this came out, for instance, The Thing, and then they're like, I don't like this newfangled artsy horror. I want, The Thing. It's like probably every generation is going to have that like divide, of like, you're always expecting kind of what you've been given before. And when something else comes along, it's like, you're not always ready to like receive it.
But then you see like, though I know you didn't like it and I never saw it, the Oscar-nominated horror movie this year was a total body horror film that had like a bunch of, like body horror stuffs in it. So that's one thing.
Y'all don't come for me. Okay, I just didn't. If you follow me on Letterboxd, I just didn't really care for the substance, but the effects are really good in it.
Yeah, that's what I'm
it's
saying,
really
though.
gross.
Yeah.
So
I think that's just impressive that such a lauded movie was so gross. Like,
yeah. I was
great.
definitely happy about that. That something so like lowbrow, quote unquote, was nominated just inherently because like you could see like the effects people on that movie like had to have worked really hard on it. So I'm happy for them. It got best makeup and hairstyling, I think, right? In any case, yeah, I agree with you that like we've come a long way as far as like this movie being panned for being gross and then like that movie being nominated for an Oscar. Like that's just inherently cool whether or not you like that movie or I know a lot of people do. So it is a good thing. I mean, whether or not that would translate to like horror movies getting bigger budgets, who knows? Probably not. However, still cool just inherently. So I have a cool quote from Carpenter here about this film that I really like, so I wanted to read it, and we can talk about it. He said, "There's a very somber kind of inevitability to the film. It's an apocalyptic movie," hence him calling it, the first of this apocalyptic trilogy. "It doesn't come from bombs dropping. It comes from within. There's nothing you can do because here it comes. And of course, the thing is a metaphor for whatever you want to say. It's disease. It could be AIDS. It's whatever. But it comes from within you. It's the lack of trust that's in the world now. We see it all over. Countries, people, we don't trust each other. We're with somebody, we think they're our loved ones, and then they attack us. That's what the thing is. It has a lot of truth in it, dressed up as a monster movie." It's funny because he said this quote, probably like 15 years ago. I think I found an interview on YouTube with him. But it's funny how prescient.
I was going to say, glad we moved past all that.
He's known for being ahead of his time, right? Like you watch They Live or whatever, aside from like the conspiracy people who thinks it's about the reptilians, we're going to disregard those people. If you happen to be a conspiracy theorist listening to my podcast, you're in the wrong place, buddy. But yeah, as far as, him saying this is kind of, rather than being a monster movie, it has the trappings of a monster movie, but at its heart, it's about that sense of mistrust that we have for each other in the modern world. And if anything, it's only exacerbated since this film came out.
Yeah.
I think he was good at seeing kind of past the lies that were being told in mainstream culture during, the time he was making a lot of his heyday movies.
Yeah.
And he was, and in that way, he was very ahead of his time, right? Which is perhaps, I think, important to note as far as why he was not, a lot of his films were not well received during his time because he was kind of thinking about the future, I think, in a way that a lot of people were capable. And I think why a lot of people our age and Gen Zers like his movies.
Yeah.
Because they resonate with us, perhaps even more so than they did with the young people of his time,
Yeah. It just seems like during that time, there was just such a like forced, which They Live is like specifically about this, but like a forced blindness to like what was going on politically at the time and people just trying to ignore it just to like live their lives. And I think the people who tried to actually confront that in their art were not the most mainstream of people. Even if they were making big movies, they didn't succeed very well, unfortunately, but their art stood the test of time. Yeah.
It's funny because my next point was going to kind of be about my one beef with the film, which is that there are no women at all in it. Except in a scene where they're watching a tape. Then I noticed this time that's the only part of the film that features any women at all. But I wanted to note, that as I watched this film more, I think two things. One, that quote above is really interesting because he says, "We're with somebody, we think that they're our loved ones, and then they attack us." That is a very like, I'm sure there are men who suffer from domestic abuse, but it is much more likely if you are a feminine person to suffer domestic abuse, right? So that is like a interestingly kind of like almost like feminine forward, feminist point of view to even say that. Maybe somebody had kind of discussed that with him in the years since making this film, Yeah. I was like, oh, that's such an interesting thing to say, and I would love to know kind of more about his point of view on that and what made him bring that up specifically or think of that as far as it being a metaphor for the film. Because that's like kind of that's a fear that you have more as a woman, right? Is that your loved one will attack you, right? Most women who, are essayed, it's usually by a partner. It's much more likely for you to be assaulted by a loved one than it is to be by a stranger. And I think that that's like so crucial in the conversation about things like that, right? That it's like the person who you believe you can trust, the person who you should be able to trust that hurts you, right? And so that's kind of like, metaphoric of, and he seems to recognize that, right? Of this like idea of like your loved one being a danger to you in some way, right? So it's interesting that there's no women in the film, right? But like at the same time, it's like you also maybe would get to that point where he wanted to make it a broader metaphor, right? And not so specific, because like some filmmakers, contemporary filmmakers have tried to make their films a little more pointed as far as like, I haven't actually watched Lee Wannell's remake of The Invisible Man. It has Elizabeth Moss in it, who we've been watching in Mad Men. But that film is like, it's a remake of the original, and it focuses a lot more on like kind of a domestic abuse angle, right? Where her ex is like invisible, right? And he's like stalking her, which I think is cool. But it's also like, it's a little more heavy handed at that point, right? Where it's like, it's dialed down to like one aspect of the metaphor, right? Which is fine. That's a meditation you can do as an artist. But like, I think, the more I've watched it, the more I feel that Carpenter wants this to be a broad metaphor, right? And it could apply to people from where they are and from what they've experienced, which is cool, honestly. And I respect it a lot. And I think if it were me, I also would do that. So, but the other thing is, I said a conversation about men isolated from women, increasing their agitation and paranoia is an interesting thing to think and talk about when it comes to this film, because that's something that like I think in the past, the first couple of times I watched it, I was like, why are there no women in this movie? I think that's annoying, because women are 50% of the population, and like we deserve to like be part of a story like this, but also like more in the present, I think it's an interesting thing that you can think about it, like kind of an interesting. It's just an interesting thought process regarding the film. Is like, would this go differently if there were women here? Like, would they be, would they have a cooler head about it?
Watch the Thing remake.
The remake.
Or the prequel.
I don't think I want to sit through it. I'm going to bring this up a little bit more as we get further on, but that's another thing. I remember
watching it one time.
So you have seen this.
I have seen it.
But it was a long time ago.
Here's the thing. I'm pretty sure I saw it before I ever actually saw the Thing.
Oh, no.
So when I saw the Thing, I was just like, oh, they just like literally remade it. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I've read all about it, right? We also likewise were going to watch the remake.
It was Oscar season.
And also we realized it wasn't up streaming anywhere. So in order to watch it, we were going to have to pay for it, right? Even to rent it, we were like, we really don't want to spend any money on this movie. So if it had been up on like HBO or something, we would have probably sat through it just to like have an opinion. But we were like, we're not paying for that. Like, as much as I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead, like, we decided against it. But yeah, I think apparently that's really the only thing that film does right anyway, is that it has a woman in it. And even then I've heard criticisms of how she's portrayed in that movie. It's like there's like an implied romance, and I'll bring it up in a little bit. But this person who does essays on YouTube, who I really love, she was just kind of like, there's no reason for that to be there at all. Like that was obviously like a studio interference where they're like, you have to put some romance in here. It's funny
because I remember the last time we just watched The Thing, I think I made this remark of like, I was surprised that it didn't have like the sexist trappings of like normal 80s action movies. And I was like, oh, because there wasn't a woman in it for them to be sexist against. Like that was the inherent sexistness of it.
I mean, and Carpenter is not excluded from being extremely sexist in some of his films. Yeah. Like, I mean, you watch, like, I love Big Trouble in Little China, but like, come on, like you watch that movie, you're just like, okay, sure. All right, John. It's like he's definitely foibled to that as much as anything. So honestly, this film probably has aged better because there's no women in it. That's more what
I was thinking. Yeah.
And I think maybe he's done some. I would hope he's done some reflection since the 80s, but like, I don't know the guy.
The other thought I had, I was like, oh well, but other movies around that didn't really have strong like wouldn't have had. And I was like, oh wait, Alien. Never mind. That was stupid.
Listen.
Among others, I'm sure, but that was the first one that
Nobody-
popped in my head. I was like, oh yeah, the best one ever.
the best movie of
Yes,
all time,
that is
and
my
that
favorite
Ridley
movie of
Scott
all
was like
time.
able to not be like
Yeah.
a fucking asshole. You know, like
That's
some
the
people
one.
have their qualms about like her being in her underwear at the end or whatever, but it's like I don't really have any problem with that because the Alien franchise, you know, beginning in the beginning, as it were, has always been kind of like sexual tension horror, right? Like
Yeah.
there's like a certainly like if they're gonna put, you know, H.R. Geiger in there as like
Yeah.
he is a sexually preoccupied artist, you know what I
yeah.
mean? So like that's just inherently part of that particular story, you know. So I don't really have a problem with it, especially with like her being the hidden protagonist and all that in that story, you know, like so yeah, I don't think there's no excuse for it, right? But I think that there's like nuances to the conversation about like there being no women in this movie and like kind of like where you can take the conversation. So like,
But also,
I've become
sadly-
more okay with it, I guess.
Sadly, I do think that is why it aged so well.
I know.
'Cause it
That's
didn't
kind of a
have-
bummer,
it's
right?
Sad, yeah.
I guess it worked out, but
Yeah.
at what cost, my guy? Anyway, I do think it's worth, you know, discussing, you know, how the film would maybe be different with a woman or like how maybe it contributes to like the dynamic in the film
It also kind of makes it a
of
meditation
men kind of
on-
feeding off of each other's like negativity.
Yeah, it's kind of a meditation on masculine paranoia,
Yeah. And like,
which is
and like,
interesting too.
yeah, and like maybe, you know, try to think of it in like a realistic way, you know, like you're like women probably would have been a calming influence on this situation, you know, and maybe he didn't want that, like maybe he didn't want it to feel calm, you know, because they're like kind of their own like inherent toxicity and like their unresolved baggage or whatever is contributing to this situation getting worse and worse and worse. So
Who knows?
speaking of Alien, though, I noted that computer program just seems like a copy of Mother from Alien. I wrote in my notes.
Yeah, which we just watched 2001: A Space Odyssey, and
Yeah. So
it's
I guess
kind of a copy of David.
I guess
or of
every
Hal, rather.
yeah,
Sorry.
everything is a copy of Kubrick and Clark's invention.
I'm sure other people had
but
that idea too.
There's nuances.
Yeah, there were a lot of things in the thing that also resembled Alien. I thought in a good way.
Yeah.
Just the group dynamics of like just workers in like a colony type situation, like being exploited, and
Definitely.
I don't know. I appreciated that this last time we watched it. Mm-hmm. I just think the relationships between the workers were very similar, and both directors did a very good job of showcasing people just doing their jobs and like the shit work involved in that, and like I don't know.
I
it
agree
really
with you.
added to their feeling of exploitation and like how they were being used.
I agree with that. I think there's like two camps of people, right? There's the horror fans who like are like The Thing is my favorite movie, and then there's the horror fans who are like Alien is my favorite movie, and we both respect each other.
Yeah. Though The Thing does not have Harry Dean Stanton as the amazing,
Damn
most
right.
amazing working man.
I mean, The Thing doesn't have Sigourney Weaver. So.
Well, yeah. I just meant as of side characters. Sorry, I wasn't talking about main characters.
Oh, okay, all right. I feel you. I feel you. Flex.
As far as the
Flex of Harry Dean
for a
Stanton.
disposable working man, Harry Dean Stanton is
Yeah.
A+.
Him and Yaphet Kotto. I love their
Oh,
dynamic
yeah,
in that
Yaphet
movie.
Kotto, too.
I watched the 4K a few months ago, which I was immediately regretful that you weren't sitting with
Yeah.
me when I was doing that. But it's fine. We own it now, so we can watch whenever we
Yeah.
want. By the way, best looking 4K I've ever seen. I know I'm biased because that's my favorite movie, but like from the 4Ks I've watched thus far, that one like just like absolutely gobsmacked me. Like so good. Like that's a movie that you should buy on 4K. You know, like not all the movies like look different on 4K, but that one did. Even for me with my bad eyesight and everything, like I don't know, like. But I was so struck by their just the two of them, and like how maybe it's just because we're becoming more class conscious, like. But like I was like yes, these two guys. They're like man. They're like, this sucks. You know, like they're just like so like they're so complaining
so
and they
real.
have every right to be
Yeah.
like they're just like, man, like I better get paid for this. And they're like just shit like that where you're just like hell yeah, man. Like because they're just like the working stiffs. Like they're not like scientists or whatever. Like they're just like trying to make some money on this
I think
on this ore trip or whatever, you know.
for The Thing, the rollerblading guy, I don't know his name. Sorry.
I don't know either.
I think he's
yeah,
the
there's a
most,
few
like-
characters in the thing that are kind of just like working guys who like are in a bad situation.
He's my favorite one, I think.
Yeah. So what is like he's like, can you turn that
Yeah.
music down? He's like, sure, man, and he like doesn't do it at all because he doesn't give a fuck. Like, yeah, we're like, yeah, relate to that.
Yep.
So a little bit about the effects in this movie. Rob Bottin. We're going to say Bottin. Rob Bottin was only 23 years old when he became head of the effects for this film. 23. Apparently, the great Stan Winston helped a little bit with some of the scenes in this film. Specifically, the dog scenes is the information that I found. So, like when they put the dog in the kennel with the other dogs, and they kind of first realize that dog's fucked up, you know.
Yeah.
The great Stan Winston, who directed Pumpkinhead, that we talked about already, helped with those particularly. So, but Bottin had quite a large team helping him for this film. The quote I heard was 35 people working on the effects with him, kind of in charge. From the exhaustive Wikipedia for this film, the creature effects used a variety of materials, including mayonnaise, creamed corn, microwaved bubblegum, and KY jelly, which is just such a repugnant list. This guy sounds like he was a true obsessive. He's 23 years old, and yet still got badly ill during the filming of this and was hospitalized from overwork. So he was like hospitalized from like exhaustion and being sick because he was like never taking a break. And you remember how quickly you bounce back when you're 23. Yeah. So like this guy was like on the death's door apparently by the end of filming.
That's also some overworking I would have partaken in at 23 and not now.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I get it.
It seems like it was worth it because now this guy is legend, you know, but like, yeah. In my notes, I wrote so much goo in all capitals. I wish horror films would start doing goo again. Yeah. Some of my favorite horror films are just gooey. I mean, I think, you know, the substance for my criticisms of it is quite a gooey horror film. So, I mean, I'm on board with it. Another little nugget I found. The team originally wanted to shoot this film in black and white. I was a little torn about that as far as whether I felt that would have been good or bad, or
I think it would have been cool, except I just really love how this film looks, so I cannot imagine another way. Like, it looks so great. The fire against like the ice.
I think it's kind of like the same as like you know how George Miller did the black and chrome version of Fury Road. It's in black and white. Have you ever heard about that?
No.
There's a black and white version of Fury Road, and I think it's the same. It's kind of the same conversation, right? Where you're just like, this looks cool as a novelty.
Yeah.
But like, and I can imagine this film looking cool as a novelty in black and white.
I'm sure he would have made it look amazing.
But then you like look at like all the colors, like the outside, some of the scenes where they're like purple, neon purple, and neon blue, and like it's just like radioactive, you know, where you're just like everything is cursed by this thing. Everything's been touched by this thing. And like, I don't think it would give the same effect, you know, of like this kind of like everything has been kind of contaminated. Everything is like radioactive now. It's like you're in Chernobyl and everything's been touched by the radioactivity. And like, you can't stop it now. It's already happened, you know, like, but it's so beautiful to look at too. My favorite horror is always a marriage between like the visually beautiful and the visually grotesque, right? That's like my aesthetic desire when I'm watching something. And I don't mean like something that's beautiful, like a beautiful woman or like a handsome person or whatever. I mean like there's it strikes you because it's beautiful to you in a way that is, it goes beyond like kind of like what mainstream culture would deem beautiful, right? It's beautiful in that it invokes a certain emotion in you, you know, or it's beautiful in that it is strikingly composed, you know. That's kind of like what I'm looking for when I watch horror, you know. Like I really want, as a viewer, I want to be struck by the beauty and to be disgusted, and not like that's a hot lady, you know. That's not what I mean. Just to be clear with everyone, that is not what I mean when I say I'm looking for beauty in my horror, you know. Like I need something a little meatier than that. You know, I need somebody like Guillermo del Toro, who's like always deeply concerned with the look of his shot, you know, like, and Carpenter as well, like that he has this like this color palette, you know, and all of it is planned. Like it's not haphazard. I did want to mention though, like another movie that I know is there's a black and white version as well, is The Mist. And I actually think that the black and white might be I haven't watched it.
I could see that.
But of the three films, I kind of feel like The Mist maybe is the one that would benefit from black and white the most because it has kind of a B movie quality to it. And also some of the effects haven't aged super well in The Mist. So I feel like maybe the black and white would help on that. But yeah. I have an interesting bit here about the difference between the novella and the film. That the novella has a different ending, right? It concludes with the humans clearly victorious, but concerned that birds they see flying towards the mainland may have been infected by the thing. Carpenter, opted to end the film with the survivors slowly freezing to death to save humanity from infection, believing this to be the ultimate heroic act. The screenwriter wrote this ending, which eschews a Twilight Zone style twist or the destruction of the monster, as he wanted to instead have an ambiguous moment between the pair of trust and mistrust, fear and relief. I like the film's ending better.
Oh yeah, I think that's an iconic ending.
It's one of the best.
Yeah,
one of the best endings.
Yeah.
Man, I love a well done ambiguous ending.
Yeah,
it shows a lot of fearlessness, I think, on the part of the artist.
It's also hard to do that without like making your audience feel betrayed, and I think that he just perfected that. Like,
yeah, there's in order to have an ambiguous ending, you need to trust your audience, right? Either you need to trust your audience or you hate your audience.
Yeah.
In which case, if it's the latter, then I mean, fuck you. And no doubt, I've watched some films that are just like kind of mocking the audience. But I think that this one is not. I think this one trusts the audience and wants the audience to kind of come to their own conclusion as well. Mm-hmm. We were talking about it even now in the present. You and I were disagreeing over the ending, which I think is awesome. That this movie can be, have been out for decades and like people are still debating over the ending, right?
Yeah.
You had a good point. I said, I think that Kurt Russell's character is the thing. Mm. I can't remember what was my reason. Or did I say the other guy was?
Because I always thought
so
Kurt
now we're getting
Russell's-
confused.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I've always thought Kurt Russell was the thing.
Who's the one who's first drinking out of the bottle?
It was Kurt, and then he hands it to...
Oh, so I thought it was
David.
Keith David's character. Because I was like, I think it's him for this reason. And you're like, no, because he hands him the bottle and that's how he passes it on to him. And I was like, what? And I've seen this movie like 5 times. And I was like, that was the first time that I even was like, you're right.
Hopefully I'm not confusing that one now.
Either way, it was whoever has the bottle first, right? And you were like, it's that guy because then he passes it on to him.
Yeah.
And you were like, I was like, you're right. I mean, this is not set in stone either.
Oh,
because,
yeah, I know. That's just my
because
theory.
it's purposely ambiguous, right? This is ending you're supposed to not know the answer to, right? So any conjecture you have on your own part is just that.
But also, like, after he drinks from the bottle, there's just like a really evil laugh.
Oh, you're like, I think he just laughs and then you can interpret it as an evil laugh.
Well, yeah,
right?
I do.
You're like, and I do. In any case, yeah. I want to talk about the music a bit because Morricone and all that, but I wanted to bring up Kurt's crazy hat in this movie.
Yes.
And I read something fun about it. That when he went into costume one day, they were like, wear this hat. And he was like, you're kidding. And then he ended up loving the hat. Like he was like, I have to have the hat.
How
like,
could you not?
At first he was like, that looks fucking silly. Like, and they were like, no, wear it. And now it's iconic. We like brought this up when we were watching it. We're like, his crazy hat.
Yeah. Like fits the character perfectly.
It just works, yeah. He can sell anything.
Yeah.
That's the magic of a movie
got the
star.
crazy beard too in that movie.
Yeah.
So good.
He's just like a crazy man, you know. He's kind of like a loose cannon. You're like, I don't know what that guy's gonna do. So I found a great quote from Morricone when he's talking about Carpenter asking him to score this film. I've asked Carpenter as he was preparing some electronic music with an assistant to edit on the film, why did you call me if you want to do it on your own? Because apparently Carpenter did some, he did like some of the insert music in this. Like Morricone did the bulk of it, or he contributed the bulk of it, but there are some little bits that Carpenter did himself to complement it. He surprised me. He said, "I got married to your music. This is why I've called you." And then when he showed me the film, later when I wrote the music, we didn't exchange ideas. He ran away, nearly ashamed of showing it to me. I wrote the music on my own without his advice. Naturally, as I had become quite clever since 1982, I've written several scores relating to my life. And I had written one, which was electronic music, and Carpenter took the electronic score. So he wrote this music before this film, apparently, or most of it. And he kind of just gave it to Carpenter and was like, here, use this. And Carpenter did. And also it seems like Carpenter was a bit shy of him.
Yeah.
I think he respected him a lot, and was kind of like, this is maestro,
That's
as
great.
far as like, he kind of like ran away from him when he was like, let's collaborate. And he's like, no. And so Morricone was like, okay. Like,
that's endearing.
I thought it was cute anyway.
I would act that way around him too.
I also have a Carpenter quote about Morricone. So Morricone did all the orchestrations and recorded for me 20 minutes of music I could use wherever I wished, but without seeing any of the footage. I cut his music into the film and realized that there were places, mostly scenes of tension, in which his music would not work. I secretly ran off and recorded in a couple of days a few pieces to use. My pieces were very simple electronic pieces. It was almost tones. It was not really music at all, but just background sounds, something today you might even consider as sound effects. So that's what he says as far as what he contributed to it. But it's a bit of a collaboration. But Morricone gets the only credit, which is probably because he just was like, I can't possibly put my name next to the great Morricone. So one more thing about the score that Quentin Tarantino has mentioned several times, that Hateful Eight is kind of his companion piece to The Thing, which I think is very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
He even repurposed parts of Morricone's score that he contributed to The Thing that were ultimately unused by Carpenter. But when you think about it, the themes of paranoia and mistrust, and then Kurt Russell being there, it's like, they are like, there's just no supernatural element in Hateful Eight, but they really are dealing with the same themes. So, and they're both set, in they're like winter.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it was funny that I feel like I just never consciously really noticed that before.
Yeah.
But like Tarantino himself has said that this is that Hateful Eight is kind of his version of The Thing. And so it's like his homage to it. I actually really like that movie.
Yeah.
I know it's a very unpleasant movie. Like, there's no nice people in it. Everybody's horrible. Everybody's awful. But it's just like, it's like 3 hours long, and I feel like it always flies by for me. I saw that movie in the theater. Yeah, I'm one of those people who's like not a huge fan of like super long films too.
Yeah.
But
Tarantino is really good at making a long film not seem super long.
he really
Remember when I
is.
watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I had the same feeling of like,
Right?
wow, I didn't realize it's already over.
Yeah, I mean, Inglourious Bastards. I mean, that movie's like half an hour long as far as I'm concerned. I'm like, that's how quickly that movie goes for me. Like, I am riveted when I watch that movie. Like, and I've seen it so many times. Say what you will about Tarantino, like, he is not a boring filmmaker by any means. You would never be like, I'm bored by this. Like, no way. Anyway, I thought that was cool. So the YouTuber that I like, that I mentioned before, and I've talked about her before on the podcast, her handle is Morbid Zoo, but she has a really great video essay comparing the Carpenter version and the 2011 version of these movies. And so I think anybody should go watch that video essay if they want to know about that. It kind of also makes it so you don't have to watch that version. If you've never seen it, maybe just watch her video essay instead, because it's so good. But yeah, she also makes the point that it fixes the one thing that someone could criticize this movie for, which is that there's no women, but then it literally messes up everything else. So it's like, at what cost? I don't know. So I have this I wanted to know your thoughts on this, but in my notes I wrote, the sense of unease is generated by uncertainty. Do you know when you've been infected? How do you become infected? So many questions are left purposefully unanswered in this narrative. And I was struck by that this time around, that they really don't give you very much, like they don't, this movie's a masterclass in kind of like subtle subtle storytelling, right? And really, really giving you crumbs.
Yeah.
And letting you do all this work of conjecture.
I thought, though, maybe I'm misremembering. I thought people didn't get infected by it. It just killed you and then made a copy of you. So that they were always copies. Like, they knew that they were copies, but they were, like, hiding it from everyone. That's why, like, anytime they figured out you were a copy, it started freaking out, and, like, then you had to kill it.
Where does it put the other bodies, though? Does it make that clear?
No. Just disappears them. Because they kind of, like, disappear.
Is it, like, absorb them?
Possibly.
I feel like every time I watch it, this is still left unclear to me, right?
Yeah, I guess I
Maybe
just assumed that, like, it killed you and then started trying to make a copy of you. Maybe using your body still.
Yeah.
But
if anything, I think that maybe is closer to the truth, but I also think that it doesn't.
I think it just sucks you up into the ceiling.
Yeah. If you know that if this movie was made now, they'd be like, it's because of this.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I like that they leave that.
Adrenochromes.
I like that they just don't even
and they're like,
care about it. Yeah.
They're like, part of the fear is the fact that that nobody knows what the heck is even going on.
Yeah.
You know? I just think that like, I think for me, when I watch something, I really want to be trusted. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want them to be like, here you go, you big dummy.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, that's like mostly the studios doing that. Like, they're like, you got to explain it, though. People aren't going to understand it.
So.
I don't know why I went with a southern accent there, but that's not the studio heads aren't from the South.
There are many very smart southern people out there.
And that most studio heads aren't
David
southern.
is southern. Okay, he's allowed.
That's my go-to dumb voice. Sorry.
I mean, you're, like I said, you are southern. You're allowed. Are there any thoughts that you wanted to share ultimately about this masterpiece of cinema? It's a great rewatch.
It is, yeah. I love watching it. Did we watch this in the Haunting?
I don't think so. No, we've seen Alien.
Yeah.
There's a really cool drive-in theater in our area.
I feel like they've definitely...
And they show mostly old movies.
Did we see... Oh, we saw Prince of Darkness there.
We saw Prince of Darkness there, yeah.
Yeah. So cool.
I've never seen this one in a theater. I would love to.
Mm-hmm. I got to see it once at the Ritz
in
Philadelphia.
Nice.
And it was cool. It was a packed theater.
Yeah,
it was like the 20th anniversary or something, or 30th, whatever.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It was cool.
I got to see a really old print of They Live at the International House. Which was awesome. It was like all like scratchy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, it was I don't know. It was just like, it was exactly how one should watch that film.
That's the cool thing about watching it at the drive-in is that they only show old copies, like real copies.
Old 35
so it's always scratchy and like perfect.
When we saw Alien, I remember some of it being like water damaged or something.
Yeah.
It just didn't look, the coloring was a little off, and I was like, that's cool though.
It's like, I mean, I think the ultimate way to watch a Carpenter movie is on VHS.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I do love watching it on like 4K. Like,
I know.
They look beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I go back and forth about that. Like some films I'm like, I don't think that 4K is how you should watch this film. Like, I don't know if this was ever meant to be watched in high definition like this. Like, that maybe you get something more out of the experience if it's like kind of corroded or something.
Yeah.
It's like,
that's like watching or listening to a classic record on vinyl versus streaming, like that's been remastered in the last year. They're both fine. But like, they both have their great charms.
It's a philosophical conundrum. It's like, but are you improving it? I think it's cool to let things be of their time.
Music's really bad about that. They're always remastering records and
Then again, I was just, lauding the beauty of Alien in 4K.
Yeah, exactly.
But some movies, it's hard. Some movies really transcend.
Yeah, I think some directors really transcend that, because there are definitely some movies that like way better on VHS just because the director didn't have as good of an eye, but like Ridley Scott and
yeah.
It's got a great eye. So it's going to look great on 4K.
I feel like Alien, I think The Thing probably looks good in low quality or in high quality, because some of the stuff this time, I think I really noticed, like how beautiful the colors are and things like that. And I think, watching this in like a 4K is going to make you appreciate that stuff more, not less. And that can't be a bad thing. So,
but,
well,
yeah, that's all I have.
Great. Thank you for guesting with me again about
Thanks for having me.
One of your favorite films.
Yeah.
And I did really enjoy revisiting it with you, even though it was like weeks ago that we watched it now.
Yeah,
since we're sorry, everybody. This episode is much later than we
delayed.
anticipated. I'm just glad we eventually got it recorded.
Yeah.
So as ever, at the end of the episode, I am going to share a little spell with y'all here. And this one is for recognizing ill intent in another. So I just want to make a point about this spell. It's a little different than some of the other ones that I have shared thus far. And I will say off the bat, this one is going to require a little bit more personal input and a little more personal grounding. And maybe in that way, this is a bit of an advanced spell, right? If you feel like you are a new practitioner and you're still kind of finding your footing, I would maybe wait to do a spell like this until you feel a little bit more confident in your spell casting and a little bit more confident in particularly your ability to ground yourself, which can take practice. And in order to do that, I would just encourage you to start having some kind of meditation practice of your own, like once a day. So that can be like actual meditation, that can be like a yoga practice, that can be, learning to play a calming instrument. I don't know, whatever you want it to be, but some kind of grounding practice of some kind, I think, is important for this particular spell. And you should have kind of, been practicing grounding yourself for a little while, because it can take a bit to get the hang of that. But it is kind of an essential part of this particular spell. So sit cross-legged with your back against the wall. You don't have to sit with your back against the wall, but it can help you stay grounded if you are not like well versed in grounding. Make sure it's in a quiet place, preferably a room with nobody else in it. No extra noise except for like white noise. Birds are okay, or like traffic going past outside the window, but like make sure there's no music playing or anything like that. This is going to help you ground a lot more firmly and get into like a deep meditation state, which is going to be important to this particular spell. Close your eyes and you can begin to ground yourself by using box breathing. You can just do regular breathing as well, but if you're newer to, going into deep meditation, box breathing can definitely help. That is, breathe in 4 counts, hold the breath for 4 counts, breathe out 4 counts, and hold the breath for 4 counts again. So you can visualize a box while you're doing it, hence it being called box breathing. Like you're drawing the box with every count of 4. I would say do this at least 6 times. You can do it more if you feel like you need it. After that, resume breathing in and out in equal counts. Once you feel like you're in a state of being, truly grounded, or you're entering kind of a deep meditation state, that means like not being distracted by your phone, not listening too much to things that are going on outside of the room. You're kind of like, starting this introspection process of just kind of communicating with yourself and not being distracted by whatever's going on around you. I would say that is a good indicator of you having reached a state of deep meditation, which is where you want to be to start this visualization. So visualize a house. It can look however you think it should look. The person that you're inquiring about, since this spell is for recognizing ill intent in another, you kind of theoretically would have someone in mind who you are trying to suss out their intentions, right? So the person that you're curious about lives inside of this house that you visualized. So go up to the house in this meditation and knock on the door. So this is a really important part of this spell. Does the person you're thinking of answer the door? If they do, what expression or what verbalization occurs in them? Follow this thought process wherever it wants to go. So I will, once again reiterate that it's really important to have a certain amount of trust in your own intuition, your own ability to ground yourself, your own judgment, things like that. And that's why I would once again say this spell is a bit of an advanced spell, right? But I think when you're, doing something as complicated as trying to suss out someone else's intentions, you kind of have to be at a point where you trust your own intuition, right? So once again, follow this thought process where it wants to go. Be careful to realign your breathing if it starts to get off track, if you start to hold your breath, if you feel like, you're not breathing in and out the same amount of counts, that's fine. Just realign your breathing. That's going to help you if you feel like you're slipping out of your state of deep meditation. You want to kind of go back into it if you feel like you haven't gotten the answers that you're looking for yet. And ultimately, I would say at the end of this spell, repeat the meditation until an answer becomes clear. You don't have to do this successively, right? You don't have to meditate all day if you're not getting the answer that you wanted. But I would say if you feel like in the first meditation you don't get the answer that you're trying to find, I would revisit it later. It could be the next day, it could be a week later, however long you feel like you want to wait. If you feel like you're having trouble getting into that state of deep meditation, you might need to kind of focus on your meditation practice for a while first before you attempt this spell again. And on that note, as above, so below, and peace out until next time. This podcast is produced by David Settle. He also made the music.